Hi.
There it is. I'm Dave Rupert, and I am here to talk to you about flexible media and responsive web design. That is actually a very terrible title for a talk. So, hold on, I bought this. So, I'm going to change the name of the talk title on you to Gettin Flexy with Uncle Dave. That is exactly what I look like with my shirt off, so just imagine, dudes. So yeah, Uncle Dave, I figured if Zeldman can be like the godfather of web standards, I could at least be like Uncle Dave, you know? I'm going for it. I work at Paravel. Paravel is a small three-man team based here in Austin, Texas, and we do good work. You probably know my coworkers, Trent Walton, Reagan Ray, they're superheroes. Yeah, Reagan Ray, if you guys don't know him, you should check out his portfolio at reaganray.com. Bing bong, plug. Reagan Ray, if you just want to feel bad about yourself and like, just go to his portfolio, crack it open, you're gonna like just weep, going like, I can't draw, I'm not good. Trent is also very similar in that manner. You open up his blog and you're like, oh, I can't write blogs. Trent's amazing. I taught Trent, true story, how to make websites back in 2000 something early, and he paid me $80. That was cool. And then he goes on to like be better at you than what you taught him. So that's cool. I really like Trent. I like these guys. We've known each other since like high school. We're just a three-man team and we're not growing. We're not gonna hire. So yeah, you can acquire us, true story, for season passes to space. Moving on, I make tiny jQueries. So I've written a few tiny jQuery plugins, Lettering.js, FITVIDS.js, and FITTEXT.js. And these, I'll talk about a couple of these, but lettering is like a glorified span injector. FITVIDS helps your videos fit inside a responsive web design, which I'll talk later. And FITTEXT helps your text be kind of radical in a responsive web design. I co-host Shop Talk Show with Chris Coyer. You guys probably been to his blog. I go to his blog like every day still. I don't know what I'm doing, so I just Google CSS tricks. What'd you do, Chris? So it's me, Chris Coyer, a guest, a bunch of questions, and then all the hottest industry drama we can find. Divs versus section elements? Oh yeah, we'll talk about it. We also have a soundboard with fart noises, so if you're into that, you should subscribe to that. True story. Also, I host a podcast called the ATX Web Show. It's a podcast all about the web design and development scene here in Austin, Texas. It's about you guys, so if you haven't heard of it, I apologize. We've been on a bit of a hiatus, but there's rumors of a reboot, and I'm pulling in some people to help me out with that. And, first of all, Travis Swide's back in the back. He is a genius and very involved in community. So, be expecting an email from us soon. Also, I feel compelled to mention that I graduated from the University of Texas with a degree in Japanology. Interesting fact. So, if you're sitting here thinking, man, this computer scientist is going to tell us stuff, no, I majored in anime. So here we go. Alright, so today's agenda is pretty simple. We're going to do a brief overview of responsive web design. I'm going to teach you how to get Flexy. And then we're going to get into some advanced responsive web design. And then we're going to talk about El Futuro de Responsive Web Design in Todo el Mundo. I'll try to do that section entirely in Spanish. We already had a pizza party, but I was going to plan a pizza party afterwards. But anyway, I guess since that's not going to happen, we'll just do trust falls. Sound good? So if we run out of time, we're going to do trust falls. It'll be a team building exercise. Look to your neighbor. It should be good. Okay, what is responsive web design? Who here knows what responsive web design is? Oh, that's a pretty good show of hands. So because some people still don't know what responsive web design is, I feel compelled to kind of cover the basics. True story, this appeared in an article on VentureBeat. Moving on, responsive web design is just 3 rad ingredients. It's flexible grids, All right, tell me more. Media queries, these things are awesome. And flexible media. Again, that's why we're here. We're about to get Flexy, right? Also worth mentioning, it was introduced by Ethan Marcotte at Deep on Twitter. You guys should follow him. He's hilarious, and he has really excellent cat GIFs. So you should, it's kind of the key part of following him is you get some really rad GIFs, or GIFs, as you will. So yeah, anyway, he wrote an article for a list apart, for a list apart, and just kind of introduced this concept of responsive web design, these three ingredients together. So the first element is flexible grids. Kind of, you can tell by this little diagram, right? Pretty self-explanatory. So flexible grids are grids that will flex. So they are coded in percentages, and they kind of squeeze in, and then they squeeze out. So, and then you put your content in there. Maybe you're gonna have one, like a column of text and covering two of those, and then you have a really cool image in the last one, and then it's gonna like squeeze, and then, yeah, it works. It's kind of cool. So, the next question is, how do I make a flexible grid? My lawyer, Billy Murphy, told me I have to put this slide up, so we'll just move on. The responsive web design formula is really, really simple. You'll just, everyone memorize it. It's target divided by context equals the result. All right, everyone soak this in. So if you have a 300 pixel column in your grid of 1,000 pixels, that's really terrible, but it's a really even number. You get 0.3. So you take 300 pixels, your target, divided by 1,000 pixels, your context, the parent element, the parent container, you get 0.3, which is a ratio. So then you times 0.3 times 100, and you get a percentage. This is really, this isn't even like algebra. This is like arithmetic. So I trust everyone can do it. So here we go. Pop quiz, math quiz. Make a 280 pixel sidebar in a 960 pixel layout. 280 pixels divided by 960 pixels. You don't know, because it's really hard. The number is awful. It's like 2.9, that's really terrible. So what you do is you take the .299 and you times it by 100. You're following me, and then you get a percent. And then you just pop that into your CSS as width 29.167%. I have heard people say, they've said, Uncle Dave, browsers, they don't understand anything past the second decimal point, so you don't need to put anything in past the second decimal. Maybe, maybe that's true. Where I kind of stand on it is just use the biggest number you get, because you're plugging it into a computer. Why are you doing the computer a favor? You're like, hey computer, let me help you do math. It's a damn computer, let it do math, right? Let a computer be a computer and do math. So that's where I stand on the issue, regardless. All right, so media queries, that's the second rad ingredient. Media queries are pretty awesome. So you just set at media screen and min width 600 pixels. This means at some point you're going to hit, as you're moving your browser, you're making it bigger, or the device is getting bigger, like you have growing TVs in the future. As the device is getting bigger, you're going to eventually hit a min width of 600 pixels. And then you triggered something. You trigger whatever, you can do whatever you want in here. For example, body, background white, and then because this screen is bigger than 600 pixels, it has turned pink. There you go. This is just one of the tips in my future upcoming book apart book called Background Pink Driven Development. If you don't understand what's going on in your design or your layout, you just say background pink, turn it pink, boom, you know what's going on. If it doesn't turn pink, well, you're not clearing a flip. So anyway, a little bit of a spoiler, but you can buy this book. It's coming out in January, I hope. Okay, Uncle Dave, give us a more practical example, right? That's what you're saying. Okay, I got one. So, you have content in a sidebar, right? But because like in their natural state, they occupy 100% of the screen. That's awesome. And they don't float. That's even more awesome. So at media screen min width, let's say 540 pixels, because I'm just feeling that. I'm feeling 540. You're gonna say content, boom, you're 70 pixels, and you're gonna float left. Sidebar, you're 30%, you're gonna float, boom, right. Just like your favorite blog. That's exactly what's happening. So this is how you build, you're using media queries and you're kind of extending, you're creating a flexible grid like suddenly. So it's like 100% and then at 540 pixels, boom, you have a flexible grid happening. Pretty easy concept. The last one is flexible media. So you have a cat and the cat is dancing, and because you put it on one of these grid units, you want to make sure it squeezes. But if you just plopped it in there with the height and width attribute, it would fail on you. The cat would always be that size, and you try and squeeze and it's be like, no, I'm supposed to be this size. So you have to say max width 100%. You have to say, no cat, you're never going to be more than 100% of the parent element of the containing grid unit. And then the cat will just say, okay, I totally respect that. This is pretty optimistic. You might like, yeah, this is pretty optimistic. We'll get into that, but this is a great place to start when you're doing responsive web design. Just put this in. For the most part, it'll work, and then you'll kind of learn some painful lessons as you go, but it'll work. It'll be good. Any questions at this point? We've covered all the awesome principles. Everyone's good? Good. I'm gonna have a beverage. That's a tasty beverage. You'll notice 2 of the ingredients we have mentioned have the word flexible in them. So if somebody's like, hey, I made a responsive web design, and it's not flexible by any means, not a responsive web design. A little litmus test. Why flexible? So listen to your Uncle Dave here. Back when I started building the web, we used to use tables and everything was flexible, and that was a terrible idea. So we invented these columns, and these columns would sit like either in the left, well, they started in the left side of the browser because you didn't know you could center things, and then you figured out you could center things. So you'd have this column, and it would be 600 pixels wide, because you were like, that's cool, that'll fill up every screen on the planet. I did it. And then what happened? Then, like in the next year, some dude like wrote a blog post, and he was like, I just made my blog 720 pixels wide. And you're like, whoa, that's like a quarter more real estate, actually. So you're like, dude, that's wonderful. So I'm gonna do 720. And then the next year, some dude writes a blog post, 840. I made my blog 840. You're like, whoa, that site goes up to 840. And then some dude writes a blog post and he's like, 960. And you're like, whoa, I gotta try 960 because it works on everything, right? And then iPhone came out, 320. Okay, well, I'll just make a website that's 320 pixels wide. Bing, I did it. iPad. Okay, I'll make a website. I got it. That's 768 pixels wide. Oh, if you turn it. Oh, damn. So it'll always be, so we have been tricking ourselves so much. We just sit around and trick ourselves. We're like, oh, I know popular devices. I'm going to just design for those. We don't know them. So that's why you got to be flexible. I wish you could just go to Best Buy. Look at Android devices and be amazed at how many different resolutions there are. We've been tricking ourselves that we know resolutions. So this idea of being flexible is kind of the way forward, at least for me, in how to approach the web. So how to get flexy. This is 5 steps to a better you. Step 0, I have to put this step in because I've heard that you remember only the first and the last things you ever hear. So the middle ones are all going to be lies, and then the first one is actually going to be true. Step 0, never use maximum scale. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, when you do responsive web design, you have to do this thing that's like a meta tag. So you say meta, name, viewport, content width, device width, and then some people put maximum scale 1. And what this does is it makes you unable to like pinch and zoom a phone. So you're basically saying like, I'm the boss, I'm gonna make it work, boom, you can't pinch and zoom. Well, imagine if you will, I go to breakfast every week. I go with my neighbor Cleo. She's 76 years old. She is awesome. She can outrun me in a foot race, but she's 76 years old, so her eyesight is obviously like not top notch, you know, she can't like, she's not eagle eyes like she used to be. So one day I was watching Cleo, she pulls out her iPhone. Yes, this 76-year-old lady is using an iPhone. You're like, demographic is totally smashed here. So this 76-year-old lady is using an iPhone, and she goes to this website, and she can't read the text because they put it in some insanely small font, and she tries to zoom in, can't zoom in. So she just gets irate. She's just like, ah, that's stupid, closes it. You just lost a visitor named Cleo, and she's my neighbor, and you're a jerk. So, I have to tell this story. So, how to be a prince? You don't use maximum scale, use initial scale. And you just say, hey, I want you to be 100%. I want you to be 1. And that is how you win the internet. Yes, that's true. I've seen, my brother works at a company, a web design company, and they like had initial scale like 3.7. It was really weird. So like when you brought up the site on a phone, it was all zoomed in. Really bizarre, but I wouldn't do that either. I'd stick to 1. And that's just a pro tip there. Also, for IE10, I just found out you have to do @MS viewport with 100%, height 100%, which means Microsoft take up the whole viewport. This is in your CSS, and this might make more sense because you're doing like a style thing. I just found out that they do this for IE10, so yeah, you should think about that. You should also probably include it to make it work. All right, so step 1 to get in Flexy is surrendering control. Who here is a designer? Who considers himself a designer? Okay, who's a developer? Yeah. Who's like in between? Who's like a developer? Yeah, cool. So, yeah, so at Paravel, my company, cool guys, we hated responsive web design when it came out. When this article that Ethan wrote hit the internet, we were irate. I was like, this is the stupidest thing ever. He is a stupid. He's breaking the internet. Dummy dum dum. I was furious. I was like writing tweets that would like destroy him. I was like writing blog posts about how messed up the whole thing is. I was so wrong. We like, eventually like we got over ourselves because we had a client that came to us. No, we had kind of like, we flipped out about it. I was like, and then I was like, and I was like, and then I was like, no, that's stupid, I'm gonna burn it. And then, boom, I'm like total advocate. I saw the light. And what happened for us is like, we started out doing it. We were just like, let's try it. Let's try it. So we like sprinkled it into a little website, and we were like, okay, yeah, well that kind of worked. That was kind of cool. And then the next one we were like, oh, you want to try to do media queries again? That was cool, and we did. It was awesome. But then we got asked to do a website for the Do Lectures. It's a company in in Wales specifically. The Do Lectures is like TED Talks for people who do stuff. So I really can encourage you to go listen to them, and they're very limited, and TED is surprisingly not limited in who they invite on stage to talk. So I really encourage you to check out the old Do lectures. They're really awesome. Anyway, so they asked us, they said, can you do us an HTML5 video site? Okay, I love HTML5. And make it responsive. And we were like, yes, we'll try. We'll do it. We'll do it. And we didn't know what we were getting into. We didn't really understand the pain of HTML5 video. It's kind of awful, but it's getting better. But yeah, we learned the lesson. We were like, hey, this is actually works out. So some of the things we did for that was we embraced fluidity. And that's a word, right? Fluidity? I think it is. So we were gonna start with an adaptive strategy, like ka-chunk, 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 and like basically like design and code like 5 websites. And that is a lot of work. But when we started doing that approach, we realized, hey, this isn't like as genuine. This doesn't feel right. It was all about the feel. This doesn't feel right. So we just put everything on a flexible grid. We put all of our content, we just tried it out, we gave it a bunch of squeezes, and we were like, hey, you know what, this feels better. So we learned how to embrace fluidity. Also, as I kind of mentioned before, the idea of like common breakpoints like 320, 768, 1024, 9060, like those don't exist. I mean, sure, there's like popular devices now, but as I illustrated before, that changes every 2 years, right? And clearly you don't know about Android. It's pretty awful. Because if you think like 320, 768, and 1024, like the breakpoints, then I'm just gonna go out on a limb and guess that you are a white person in your 20s, you own all Apple products, and you live on a coast, probably, or in Austin. So, I'm just telling you how it is. Your Uncle Dave, man, hot drummer, bringing it. So, I just want you to know. So, instead of like just assuming breakpoints and assuming devices and assuming your design's like gonna fit into these parameters, do the Austin thing, man. Just add breakpoints when things get weird, man. Just embrace it. It's not always gonna be like what you're expecting. Sometimes your design calls for something totally weird you wouldn't expect. And then sometimes your design, like you have this really awesome design, and then you like make it responsive, and you're just like, oh, that one thing is kind of totally stupid. Like it like doesn't work in the grand scheme of things. You were just like hanging on to it. So it kind of is a crucible for good ideas, in my opinion. Moving on, step 3. Use min width. So there's 2 types of media queries. Well, there's like a billion, but there's 2 types of media queries that you're going to do in responsive web design a lot. That's min width and max width. Okay, we'll just kind of break this down. Min width is like desktop down. So like you started with the design, and you're going to say, okay, max width. So when you start with the design, you're like, okay, if let's say an iPad shows up, its max width is 768. So I'm gonna, okay, so I had this cool design, and now I'm gonna go under. And so under here, okay, I'm gonna design a site, but then what if a device that has a max width of 320 shows up? Well, I'll just write a bunch of other stuff. So you're like kind of going desktop down. This works good for legacy sites. So if you're like at an enterprise company, which I'm sure like 80% of you guys are, because we're Austin. Yeah, like you're probably gonna do that would probably be a good deal. But if you're starting fresh, I'd say go the other way. And it's probably good for first timers too. If it's your first time doing responsive web design and like you understand how CSS works and you're like gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna fix it here, this is a good approach. But the question kind of immediately happens is like, what happens when you go larger? Well, now you gotta go like 2 directions. So you're managing 2 kinds of media queries going. I hope that makes sense to you guys. Just scream or cry if it doesn't. So, so min width is like mobile first. So you just assume the min width of any browser is 0 pixels, which is sort of an impossibility. I'll let you stew on that. It's sort of like, can God build a rock bigger than he can lift or whatever? But can a browser be 0 pixels? Big question. All right, so you start off with 0 pixels, and then as you're going out, you're saying, okay, if at the minimum width of 300 pixels, let's do something different. So in this sense, pixels are, you're adding pixels. So you start small and go up. At the min width of this, you do this. At the min width of this, you do this. At this min width, you do this. This is really just progressive enhancement rebranded. You guys have probably heard this term, but progressive enhancement is the idea that like you build for a baseline and then you give features or you give enhancements for better things like IE6 versus Chrome 45,000 or whatever it's at right now. It's just progressive enhancement, and more pixels is a feature. So think of it that way. Step 4, think proportionally. This is sort of like where it all kind of locks in. This is the golden ratio. I'm sure you guys, designers, you guys are all like, I know that. I've seen that. It looks like a conch shell or whatever. It's wonderful. It's innate beauty. So we've been, in design, we've been thinking in proportions for a really long time. So like this balances this. This balances this. In responsive web design, you're not building like pixels and you're not like building a PSD. You think of it more like I'm building a ratio. I'm building a proportional design. I'm building proportions that work together. And they build off each other and they grow and they, you know, you can kind of just, sort of like this thing. If you scale it out, it's still beautiful. So, and this is just a pro tip, if you're ever giving a speech, just like put this golden ratio up and like, just see it correct about everything. All right, so step 5 is do not use pixels. What? Use M's. And I'm sure you guys are all like, what's an M, Uncle Dave? Let me tell you. An M is like I wrote it out here because I needed to remember it, a relative font size, or a relative, I guess it's a unit, based on the parent unit. So let's say, for example, you want to have a font or a heading that's 20 pixels, and your body copy is super small, and it's 10 pixels. So that heading, you take the heading, that size divided by that size, and then you'd equal, that would be 2M. Pretty easy, right? I know what you're thinking. Hey, Uncle Dave, I think I've seen that before. Oh my God! It's the code I showed you earlier, right? So it's target divided by context equals the result. It's easy. All right. I hope you guys are getting it. So, how to use relative typography. So you just, so this is again, I'm like doubling down on my math here, so I hope you guys are all right. So, the assumption is that the default browser size, or font size for most browsers is 16 pixels. That's 100%. I'm gonna build off of that. What you guys need to know is you should probably start here too. Or just assume that 100% equals 16 pixels, because if somebody changed the font size on their computer, they meant to. And if you set a value in pixels, you're a bastard, because they have an accessibility thing that they want to do. So, be careful out there. So you set your font size. So we want our base font size to be 14 pixels. So we set it, work with me now. We want 14 pixels divided by 16 pixels equals 0.875 times 100, 87.5%. And then that 1.5 is the line height, because we're like, oh, we want our line height to be 1.5 times, you know? And then we're just gonna use a serif because it fit in the slide. And then we have an H1, like our heading level 1. We want it to be really awesome, really large. We want it to be 28 pixels based on our 14 pixels. So we're gonna set it to 2M, and that is, everyone, 28 pixels. You got it. So, moving on, you insert a media query at 600 pixels. You're like, font size is too small, man. Bump it up. So you bump it up to 16 pixels, or 100%. Your H1, ooh la la. It doesn't need to, you don't need to change, because you built a typographic system that's ratio based. So as one font size grows, the other one does. And you can override this if you want, but the H1's like, I got it, bro. You set up a really good system way down there, so I'm just going to inherit that. You just need to change the body font size, and I'll just grow with it. And you can, again, you can override that and like let that happen. But yeah, for the most part, that works. Like just increasing the body font size if you want. Also, one thing I'd caution is like don't assume people on mobile want really small font sizes, because that's actually kind of awful when you're on your phone, like at the bus stop, and you're just like, oh, can't read it. So yeah, I would, yeah, that works. And I mean, it's after this point get a little complicated, because like when you are building an M unit off of an M unit, whoa, it's like Inception math, because you're like, when you're building a ratio off of a ratio, you'll get it. Don't freak out, you'll get it. You can use a calculator, it'll take you home. And then I always leave comments, or try to, on what size I'm targeting, just to kind of check yourself and also document yourself. This works great with white space too. Let's say you have a design, your mobile site, and you're like really thin view, and you're like margin bottom 1M, and you want it to be like 1 line worth of text at the bottom. And then at the min width of 600 pixels, you're like, you know what, I want more white space. Boom, your hero unit has twice the white space. You got a pretty good baseline too. Think about it, it works. All right. So we're gonna up the engagement here. Trust levels. Let's move on. So, typography. If you're doing responsive web design, typography is your best friend. If you're a developer, you're like, you mean like fonts? And yes, we mean fonts. If you're a designer, you're like, I love typography, it's my favorite. I go to bed thinking about fonts, I love it. So, typography will be your best friend. One thing we did, Trent, my coworker, he does all these blog posts with these really like big features on the front, like on his feature posts. Super well designed, and this is kind of the story of FITTEXT. Trent was like, I wish I could have these headlines that I designed and made beautiful, kind of like scaled down with the responsive web design, kind of proportionally like filling up that block. And I was like, I think I can do this. An hour later, boom, I had it. I said, Trent, check the Dropbox. I think I got it. And this is basically how FITTEXT works. It'll take a font size, and you have a container width. I divide that by 10. And then you have this compressor value, which is a little weird, right? It's totally unscientific. It's like a guitar amp. That's sort of how I designed it. I was like, I want it to be like a guitar amp that you kind of like turn up or down, and it's non-scientific. But actually, there is math involved. You could like reverse, you could do math here. But basically, if you had a 960 wide, pixel thing, and you just attacked it with FITTEXT, it would become 96 pixels. And you can kind of fudge that, and yeah, I let you fudge it. I let you. It's almost the BBNG code. I was that close. But the idea is that it's scaled, and it's a ratio of some sort based on the container that's sitting in. So the future of FITTEXT, and this is something you'll be able to do in the near future, I hope, is these VW, VH, and VMin units that are coming out. They're already implemented in Chrome, I believe. Chrome, whatever, 9000 or whatever it's on. So basically you just say like font size 10 VW, and then that's 10% of the viewport. Easy. Or even, I think it even does the parent container. So it's like, just occupies 10%. And then you can like adjust that with media queries based on your design. The idea here is, have you guys ever made like a hero graphic for your homepage, and it says like, like awesome marketing, and it's really cool? Well, you'd have to like, if you're doing like 10,000 devices or trying to like scale up to 1 million pixels, like those are gonna fall apart. So if you're using type, it's vector. So you don't have to re-export a bunch of images, you're just using type. So you're laying type over this like image, and your image, or just even a color or a pattern or whatever. So yeah, I think it's the way forward. I think you're gonna save yourself a lot of trouble if you use typography and vector anything, SVG or anything like that going forward. We use icon fonts. Have you guys heard about icon fonts? Anyone? Yeah? Oh, pretty much. Okay, yeah. GitHub is using them now. They're a popular brand. GitHub is using them, and they're awesome. I mean, they basically are it's like a, I don't know, like a snack pack of vectors all bundled into a font, and then you can just basically like scale and use vectors. And you have, the reason it's better is because it's like just one HTTP request. If you were going to request a bunch of SVGs, that would be a lot of load on a mobile phone. They're super small font size. Generally, like icon fonts, they're like 15 kilobytes or something, which is super awesome compared to all those like dumb icons you like cropped and exported, or that like 9,000 meg sprite you made. Has anyone ever made a sprite? It's awful. It's the worst. And then they're like, oh, it's easy. You just set a background clip of like 869258 and then you have to like find this coordinate and this height and width of what your sprite is. It's terrible. And God forbid anyone adds to that sprite, like adds a graphic or anything, or changes it in the minor least bit, it like falls apart, it blows up. It's awful. So yeah. No more sprite cropping, it's Unicode, it's really easy to do. So this is how you do it in the accessible manner. There's a lot of ways to do it, but this is the only one that counts. So let's say you have an H1 and it says wizard. So you just add this span, aria hidden, and what aria hidden is going to do in like most circumstances and it's gaining ground, is that's gonna basically hide it from screen readers. So it's not gonna read that content. Otherwise it would like, well, I'll get there. Okay, so you have data icon and that's a character, and in this case it's like this little like, I don't know, wizard staff or something. And then your data icon before, this is some CSS, you have font family, my icon font, content, adder, data icon. So it's gonna grab the icon and pull that down into the CSS, and it's going to insert that before that thing. You'll get it. It just works. And then you do speak none. Well, that doesn't really work on anything, but in the future, hopefully it would replace aria hidden. But yeah. So what? Like, let's say your icon was an F, right? Like you had it in your font, like assigned to the character F, and so this little icon, I hope you guys should just mess with icon fonts so you really understand. So, but if a screen reader came by without the aria hidden, it would like read it and go, F, wizard. And it's pretty awful for a person like, with the screen reader. It's just an awful situation. So, you don't want it to do that, so you just apply aria hidden true and use that sparingly. I love icon fonts. This is just how I feel about them. All right, moving on. Intrinsic ratios. Who knows what an intrinsic ratio is? These are basically like aspect ratios. We use them on FITVIDS, which is like I described before. FITVIDS is a plugin for a jQuery plugin, a tiny jQuery plugin for embedding YouTube videos in a responsive web design. Think of it that way. If you embedded a YouTube video in a responsive web design, it like explodes. It's like 800 pixels wide and like 40 pixels tall. It's like terrible. I wouldn't even like let my mom on her blog like use that. It just looks that ugly. So what this does is it tries to maintain an aspect ratio. So you like go boom, okay, originally it was whatever. They do something weird like 640 by 405 or something like that. So anyway, like it was originally that. I want you to maintain that proportion, kind of like just scaling as you go out. So how we did that is Trent Walton, again, he said I'd pay for a video service that let me do this, and the whole internet was like, yeah, that sounds good. And I said, don't worry internet, I got this. Uncle Dave's on the case. Chris Coyer, my co-host of the Shop Talk show, and probably you've been to his blog, he was like, I have the solution. And if Chris Coyer says he has the solution, you listen to him. So then, about an hour later after talking out with Chris, we had a tiny jQuery plugin. So, this is how it works. So FITVIDS will like basically take your object, your iframe, your embed, whatever that thing that spits out from the video service, like your YouTube, they're like, copy this code. You just put that in your site. So it targets those, and it'll wrap it in this thing called a fluid width video wrapper. And the first thing it does is it sets the height of that wrapper to 0. So you're like, wait, if it's 0, nothing will show up. And you're exactly right. So what you do is you add padding to the top. And so this padding is, percentage-based padding is based on the width of the containing element. A little weird, all right? You'll get there. So you basically say, oh, here's some padding. Go to the top. We dynamically, with FITVIDS, we dynamically inject this, but for this guy, this is like a 16 by 9 is like that aspect ratio is that amount of padding. You do position relative, because we're going to absolute position something inside of it. So we add the padding top in the width 100%. You guys are following me. And so yeah, then on the embedded code, or the embed code from the service, you say position absolute. I'm going to take you over. I'm going to tell you where to go. So you say top, bottom, left, right, 0, width 100% or whatever, and it'll fill up that parent div. It's a really cool hack. And you can use this, it's a total hack, but it's a really cool one. So you can use this on like images, you could use this on whatever. You could even like have a video and then like change the aspect ratio on it. You get some black bars, but you could do anything you want with it with media queries. But this is basically how it works. So like let's focus on this one. So this is padding top 56.25%. I told you guys that was a 16 by 9 ratio, and you guys were like, yeah, I know that, adoye. But how did we get to that number? Well, you're saying you want like 9, and then it's like 16 wide, and then you get 0.562. Oh my gosh, guys! It's that code again. It showed up. There it is. So target, which is you want it to be 9 of 16 units, and that's your result. And it works on anything. It's pretty awesome. If you go to my blog, Rupert.com, I've used the intrinsic ratio method on a few things, and it's pretty awesome. It's kind of like great power comes great responsibility. It's an ancient dark magic, but it's cool. I think it's kind of a fun way, and this is kind of like extreme. I told y'all it's advanced responsive web design. You didn't believe me, but this is kind of a cool technique that you can do. So we're going to talk about the future of responsive web design. I don't know if you guys heard about responsive images. It's been a bit of a deal. So basically, if let's say you had that hero unit I've been talking about all night, I love those, and it was really gigantic. Well, that kind of sucks to like shoot at a mobile phone, you know, like a mobile first strategy. So you have this like big, you know, graphic you're trying to send to a phone. The phone's like, I don't care, I'm on 3G. I don't want this graphic at all. So the ideal situation would be, I'm going to send like a really tiny image to a phone and then let it like scale up as we go. So this got, there's like a lot of hot drama based on this, and you can go check out Shop Talk Show, the most recent episode. It's awesome. It's like a really good episode, but it's all about this. Hopefully this will get solved soon. The W3, or the WHAT working group, the WHAT working group, they have a solution called source set in the spec. It's but ugly, but I think it's what we're gonna get. Yay! So I hope you like microsyntaxes, because it's gonna be cool. But there's also like JavaScript approaches, but they incur a double download on you. So you download the small one, and then you download the bigger one. There's server-side solutions, like where you put like a PHP script on a server, and then like you give the guy a cookie and you're like, I know all the data about this guy, and then you serve him an image based on that. I think that's probably a really good one, but then you're kind of making a lot of assumptions about what that guy can support. There's not like exact parity on media queries, so it's a little stressful for me, but anyway, kind of connected to that, one of the biggest problems responsive web design has is kilobytes. So we're just like, we're gonna make a website and it's gonna be really awesome. But it ends up being like, like you're pushing so much to all these different contexts that is probably not cool. Or you're probably like bloating, or you have like a super big website you're sending to a really tiny device or whatever. So yeah, this is something we need to like solve and work on. Is this too soon? Too soon? Yeah. Waka waka. All right. So yeah, this is something to solve. So sort of how I feel about this is what we need is more web education, I call it. Web education. It's a hybrid word. You love it. But just more talk and less frameworks. I mean, it's really easy. Who's used Twitter Bootstrap? Yeah? Twitter Bootstrap is really awesome. But after you use it, like, you don't know anything about responsive web design. You're just like, I just put in some numbers and it works on my phone. And that's cool. But like, the lessons learned are not being taught, you know? For example, I mean, I don't want to I pick on Twitter because they're the biggest, but so there's this really cool component for a carousel in Twitter Bootstrap. It's like an image carousel that like will cycle through images. It's really lightweight, it's really cool, looks good, and like no one talks about it. They're just like, no one's like isolated that component and said, hey, just use this because it's really good. This is just what I just find this interesting. Like we just are like, hey, and I'm guilty of this. I mean, I made tiny jQuery plugins. I'm like, hey, take a tiny jQuery plugin, shoot it at your web page, and it'll work. We need less of that. We need people like sitting around talking, doing blog posts about how their process worked. So just like, I sit around and read the internet all the time. I would love to read posts about problems that people have in responsive web design. So who is made and like is in production with a responsive web design? A couple few, yeah, oh, pretty good. So like, you know that like area between 480 pixels and 700 pixels, where it's like an awkward teenager and it's like kind of awful? I want posts about that. Like, how did you solve that? What did you do? What happened? These are real problems. I don't want fake ones like, oh, one day there's going to be a TV in outer space and we'll have to design, here's how to design. I don't need that. I need like, what did you just do? Or what did you do well? The solutions, how to do that. I want to see how to do that. The Twitter Bootstrap thing, awesome. I want to know how they did that or why they chose what they chose. Reduced test case. So often is the time people are like, oh, the Boston Globe, it's the best responsive web design ever. You should check out the navigation on it. And like you go there and you're like, I'm a little overwhelmed. And then like you maybe view source and it's like a ton of code. Like a reduced test case with like just showing the component, like isolating components. I call them layers of the sandwich, you know? I have this theory about responsive web design, or any web design. Every website is a sandwich, and you have these layers, and if you add too many layers, the sandwich gets too big, and you can't consume it, and it's really awful. Or if you add too many pickles, which is like navigation links, like the meat will like flop out and like spill in your lap. True story. So, I want to see reduced test cases about parts of websites that like that you've challenged and you've overcome. You know, make screenshots and like draw arrows like this is gonna go here and that's gonna go here. I love those. And then tiny jQueries. That's like the like sucker punch at the end. You're like, damn, I solved it for you. Ka-chow. These are awesome too. There's like navigation solutions. There's a post by Brad Frost. I don't know if you guys have followed him or anything like that, but he's a really intelligent dude. out of New York, gonna move out to Pittsburgh. But Brad, that's enough about his life. But Brad, he wrote this post called Responsive Navigation Patterns. Okay? Yeah, okay. He wrote this post called Responsive Navigation Patterns. And it's basically like a breakdown of what other people are doing, like what the Starbucks website's doing, what a bunch of other sites are doing, and like the pluses and minuses of various navigation techniques in responsive web design. That's a mouthful to say. Some are good, or they all have like a flaw, but like which one works the best? Which one's the easiest? I would love to see posts on how to do these. And there's a lot of like plugins. It's like, just chuck this at your web page and it'll be responsive navigation. Twitter Bootstrap does that. There's the TinyNav.js. There's a ton. Those should come last. Like those are like the icing on the cake, in my opinion. And so finally, responsive web design, it's not a religion. It's just math. It's just a lot of math, but it's a lot of really easy math, arithmetic. So yeah, and I mean, if you coded everything like I just said, in total percentages and ends and stuff like that, and then your boss comes to you the next day and is like, no, we're not doing responsive, I don't like it. Guess what? You just set a width on the body and you're fine. Ta-da! Or, if your boss comes by and goes, I want a bigger website, I need it to be 1080 pixels. You say, I got that. It'll take 12 hours, but I got it. And then you just like type in one number and boom, Bob's your uncle. It's done. So, thanks everyone. If you have questions, anything, I'd love to hear them. Anyone?